Hello, everyone, and welcome to Everything Iconic with me, Danny Pellegrino. We have Billy Eichner on the show today. Of course, he co-wrote and stars in the new movie Bros, which I got to see. I loved it so much, Billy. Billy, how are you?
Thank you so much.
How are you doing now that we're sort of at the finish line, sort of? The movie's here.
Yeah, I know. It's really wild. It's really surreal. It's a roller coaster, honestly. It sounds like a cliche, but it's true. I mean, we started writing it 5 years ago, shut down because of COVID when we were about to start shooting. Then it came back a year and a half later. We shot it last fall. Then the editing, the testing, the marketing. I mean, it's I've never had this experience. And it's obviously, once you see it, you'll know a very personal movie in many ways. And I don't know, every hour I feel something different. And I'm just trying to, but I will say I'm really proud of it. You know, I love the movie too. And I know that's weird to say about your own movie. And I wouldn't say it about everything I've ever done or said, but I really love this one. And I'm really excited for people to see it.
I can't wait for people to see it. I got to see it early, and I'm a rom-com junkie anyway, but just seeing a gay rom-com like this one, it was so special. And I wondered if you're even able to take that good part in, or take the sort of success of it so far. Obviously, it's getting great reviews and people are really excited, and the people who have seen it seem to really love it. And I know you're doing so much press, but I hope you're able to just take in how special it is.
Thank you. I am trying. I mean, I am a neurotic gay New York Jew. And so stopping to smell the roses has not often been my specialty. But I will say it was very apparent, even when we were shooting the movie, that I literally forced myself at one point to stop and appreciate. Well, I mean, of course I appreciate it, you know, but to really take a moment and look around. I mean, Luke and I, you know, I know you had Luke on, you know, Luke, who plays my boyfriend in the movie. We were shooting this scene, you know, near Central Park, and we're walking and talking and doing the rom-com witty banter thing. And it's this beautiful shot with a crane, and you know, and I just, it hit me there that like, oh, this is like those rom-coms. I love rom-coms too. And I grew up loving them and have rewatched the ones I love, like so many of us, over and over and over the years. And I just thought, oh, these are like the movies I grew up with, but it's about a gay couple and I get to be a part of it. And I know how rare that is. And the whole cast is LGBTQ. And there were so many things that are unique about it, especially for a movie produced and getting released with this level of support and distribution and in this many movie theaters. And I did force myself to stop and say, this is wild. Like, this is really unique. And I really do appreciate it.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned rom-coms, and even having Mark Shaman do the score, which is, for people who maybe don't know a lot behind the scenes of rom-coms, he's done so many iconic scores. And for him to sort of come out and do this one, it's just, it adds so many of these extra special touches. And I'm of the belief that like the score is really important in a rom-com. If you look at something like Sleepless in Seattle or Something's Gotta Give or some of those movies, You've Got Mail is my all-time favorite. And those are iconic scores. And to have him doing this one must have been so special.
Oh yeah. And you know, what's amazing. Like you said, Mark did the scores for When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, Sister Act, Beaches, The American President, First Wives Club. Of course, he wrote all those songs, and Hairspray, the musical, the South Park musical. I mean, I also remember him. I remember as a little gay boy obsessed with Bette Midler in the 80s, reading the liner notes of Bette Midler albums. And he was her musical director in the 80s at the peak of her, like the pop part of her career. And he's actually the one who encouraged Bette to sing Wind Beneath My Wings when she didn't want to. The one playing for her when she sings One More for My Baby on the last episode of the Johnny Carson show, he's playing the piano for her. And I remember watching that with my parents, you know, in real time. And you know, so to have him involved is truly amazing. And we actually, without giving too much away, we collaborated on a song for the movie, which he came to play live on set. I mean, that part is really really
it's so special. I think he also was brought in for Hocus Pocus for that number that, of course, everyone remembers from the original Hocus Pocus. I think he did that.
He does pretty much everything, Bette Midler. I mean, he's a big part of, her world musically.
Billy, I was in a meeting the other day, and there was an agent who asked sort of like, who's got your dream career? Who do you model yourself after? Who's sort of like the North Star? And I mentioned Daniel Levy. And I thought about it as I was preparing for this interview and how lucky I am to have people like you guys. And I was thinking, I wonder who the people you had when you were in those meetings, when you were starting out, because I have a handful, still not enough people to tell an agent or, some production person, but who were the people that you said, and how did you react to those kinds of questions early?
I mean, there weren't many openly gay men, there just weren't. I remember when Nathan Lane came along, and Nathan, I was really lucky because I grew up in New York City and my parents loved theater, as do and I did from a young age. So I remember seeing Nathan Lane in this very famous Broadway revival of Guys and Dolls. I think I went for my 13th birthday. I don't know. It was like 1991 or something like that. I got when you turn 13 as a Jew, obviously it's a big deal. You get a bar mitzvah, and I got two big gifts. And one was tickets to see Guys and Dolls with Nathan Lane, and the other was Madonna's Sex Book. So I had very supportive parents from a young age. I'm very lucky. And I remember seeing Nathan in that. He was playing a straight character, but he had this larger than life comedic energy on stage. I mean, you couldn't take your eyes off of him. And then a couple of years later, The Birdcage came out. And I remember seeing that and thinking, well, I love this actor. He wasn't out yet, interestingly enough, because even when you were playing flamboyant roles, people just didn't come out. It's remarkable. Someone reminded me recently, and I couldn't believe it, that Sean Hayes only came out after that entire first run of Will and Grace, and I'm not judging it because we were at a very different time. And I think especially if you were an actor playing a flamboyant gay role, then you were really scared, even though it was maybe obvious to the audience and people knew, but to sort of cement that in the industry at the time meant you weren't going to get opportunities. And so there were people like Nathan who, even if they didn't explicitly say I'm gay in the media right away, I was certainly drawn to. But those were few and far between. I mean, then Rupert Everett came along at my best friend's wedding. But the truth is, how old was I when that came out? I was already 20 or something, So to be a kid, there just wasn't much. So I tended, like many gay men of my generation and older, because I'm not a youngster, I just turned 44. I looked to women.
Yeah.
It was Madonna, I was an obsessive Madonna fan, and Bette Midler and Streisand, and that might sound like a cliche to people, but, I have no shame in that, because to me, they were always surrounded by gay men. They had big gay male following. So even if you didn't see, in the case of Madonna, you actually saw gay male dancers openly gay on stage. I think Truth or Dare, her documentary, which I went to see opening weekend, I made my parents go take me. That was amazing to see two gay men in that. And they were not even fiction. There was a documentary. They were real gay men making out, right? And at the Pride Parade in New York. And I remember there's a scene where they go and this was 1990. So there's a moment of silence for victims of AIDS at the New York Pride Parade that you watch in the movie. And that really impacted me, even though obviously AIDS was very scary and traumatic, especially as a child who didn't fully grasp it. Even then, I loved, it was a relief to see gay men, and comforting and inspiring. Those were some of the first gay men I saw. And then there were, like I said, the women who felt like outsiders, who were not cookie cutter types, but who became superstars, like Streisand or Madonna, who were really ambitious, who were very strong. Bette Midler, I loved how she was such a great mix of sort of, the mainstream audience loved her, but she was also very downtown New York, where she came from, and
bathhouses.
Yeah. And so I was drawn to all of that. And I think in those women, those were my inspirations as a kid, because there just weren't many gay men, and there were straight actors I loved too.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, oh, I loved Kevin Kline, right? I loved William Hurt. Oh, I loved Tom Hanks as a kid. I mean, seeing Tom Hanks in Big and all those Nora Ephron movies, I love Steve Martin Short. There were those guys too. They weren't gay, but I loved them as comedic talents.
I was just talking to a friend about why so many gay men love Sex and the City and Golden Girls. And I think oftentimes it's because there aren't a whole lot of gay TV shows. So gay men find the closest thing to them. And usually they were gay writers writing those women. And so we attach ourselves to the Golden Girls or Sex and the City.
Absolutely. 100%. And oh my God, the Golden Girls. I mean, I lived
the best.
I watched it when it first ran, which shows you how old I am. And I still watch it to this day. I hadn't watched, it's interesting. I have not watched Will and Grace in a long time. I don't want to give it away. Deborah Messing has a truly hilarious cameo in Bros. I don't want to say anything more than that. But she's amazing, and she's been on Billy on the Street, and she's always wonderful. But I watched Will and Grace last night. I was just sort of channels, and I hadn't seen it in a long time. And I think it was maybe from the first season. It was early Will and Grace. And I mean, in some ways it was very of its time, of course, but I don't think people appreciate how radical that was. And that was really a lesson in funny is funny. Because if you can make people laugh, even if they don't know gay people or are uncomfortable with gay people or whatever it might be, you will get them on your side. And the show was just undeniably laugh out loud, consistently clever and funny.
Yeah. I remember when I was coming out watching the DVDs. I hadn't watched it right when it was on. I think it was towards the end of its run, but a friend was like, you have to watch it. And she got me the DVDs right when I came out. And it was just so important to me just because I got to see gay people on screen. And you mentioned Nathan Lane. I was listening to this interview. I think it was maybe Rob Lowe's podcast or some interview he did. I love Nathan Lane too. And he was saying after Birdcage, which was this huge hit. And I think around that time, there were these like sort of gay comedies like In and Out, Birdcage, My Best Friend's Wedding with Rupert Everett. But he was saying right after Birdcage, he sort of expected these doors to be open and for these movie roles to come. And I think he said he got offered Mouse Hunt, which was Gore Verbinski's like first big movie, but it was a family role where he was acting opposite a mouse. And he got offered Mr. Magoo, which was this terrible movie. Leslie Nielsen ended up doing a reboot of the cartoon. But it was so fascinating to me because there was this weird sort of moment in the late 90s where it seemed like there were big budget comedies about gay characters, maybe not openly gay actors. And then it sort of passed. And I've read in interviews with Rupert Everett that people were talking, I don't think he was nominated for an Academy Award, but I remember it was like, he got so much wonderful press and it seemed like he was on track to be this huge star. And then unfortunately, there just weren't roles. And I'm so grateful now that there are more LGBTQ roles, but it's still not great. And so having a movie like yours is really amazing and important. And I know you've been on this press tour and you've been everywhere. And I know it must be exhausting to try to explain how important it is and why it's important for people to see this movie so that more gay creators can have their movies made. And so I hope people realize that. And not only that, but it's also just a fucking great movie. But I just hope people go see it and realize that it is important for us to support these. Even more recently, like the Queer as Folk reboot was canceled on Peacock. And we get these things, but unfortunately, they're not always given the kind of support and marketing and everything that we need them to. And so, yeah, I hope people support. I don't know. Was there a question in there? Did I?
I'm not sure, but I hear what you're saying. And I am really proud of the movie. And that's not to say we haven't had decades of great indie movies about gay couples. And I was really lucky. I was almost always in New York. And I ran to see The Broken Hearts Club, Greg Berlanti's first movie, the night it opened at the Quad Cinema in New York, which is always where these gay indie movies played usually. And I saw all over the guy, Dan Bukatinsky's movie, and I saw Edge of 17. And Oh my God. I saw another gay teen movie. I mean, I saw all of
There's
those
like
movies.
10 eating out movies. Remember that
Yeah.
moment in
And
time?
I would run to see them on opening weekend because I wanted to support, but also because I wanted to see our lives reflected, even if it wasn't a perfect movie. It was something. And, it's true. Those movies, they just did not get the financial support from the straight powers that be in Hollywood. And that's why Bros is a little different when it comes to movies getting a major studio release. It's Bros is opening in over 3,000 movie theaters across North America for an R-rated Judd Apatow produced gay rom-com. That is unusual. The gay movies, quote unquote, that usually get that type of support have often been tragedies about our lives where our stories are being told by straight movie stars. And some of those movies are great. Of course, I love Brokeback Mountain. It's a masterpiece, and Milk. And these are very important movies, but Philadelphia going way back, they're great movies, but our stories were being told for us. And they were always cloaked in tragedy and suffering and the challenges of our existence. And those challenges are part of our lives and certainly part of our history. But can't we just go to the movie theater and see a great comedy about our lives, and what's fun and funny and sexy and the characters in Bros are flawed, they're complicated, but it's not tragic. It's a very feel-good, uplifting movie. And my goal was to present an authentic version or the one I've experienced of gay modern dating, as I know it, at least. I can't speak for everyone, but with the sex and the rules or lack thereof that we've created around monogamy and the apps and all the ways that we drive each other crazy now in sex and dating and relationships. But to give things that might be shocking or subversive to a straight audience. I don't think it's shocking to a gay audience, but it's surprising to a straight audience. But to give it that same warm, delightful, uplifting, glossy Nora Ephron, Nancy Meyers glow. That's what I wanted to do. And
you did it, Billy. You did it.
Thank you.
You did it. I think it's really going to be one of those rom-coms that people like myself, we go back to and rewatch because the best rom-coms, and there haven't been many as of recent, but they're the ones that we can watch over and over again. And I mean, I know that I immediately after I saw it, I was like, oh, I want to watch it again. But there's so much has been made about how all of the actors, and there's so much LGBTQ talent in this movie who get those little moments to shine, and like they do in all the Judd Apatow movies, like Bridesmaids. Or I remember Kristen Wiig showing up in Knocked Up, and she had like one little scene, but it was like, oh my God, who's that? And it's so nice to see LGBTQ people who don't normally get those opportunities in this. But what I want to talk to you about is there's also these brilliant actors from people might know projects from the 90s, people like Harvey Fierstein and Amanda Hurst from who played Marcy on Married with Children. Pierce. Yeah. I'm sorry. Amanda Pierce, who played Marcy on Married with Children. I remember watching that show with my family, and they get these moments too. And I'm curious talking to them and getting them on board this project. Did they tell you any stories about what it was like? Because they were some of the few and only openly LGBTQ people back in the 90s who were working, and sometimes at the expense of their own jokes and, people making fun of them on screen.
Harvey Fierstein goes back to the 80s. He made his hit Broadway play Torch Song Trilogy into a film in the early 80s, and was an out gay man. And Amanda, who I knew from being Marcy Darcy on Married with Children. She was also in Fright Night. I don't think she's been in a movie in 30 years. She mainly directs and teaches. But I remember her being on the cover of The Advocate in 1992. She came out. She was the first woman to ever come out who had a major role on primetime TV before Ellen DeGeneres, before Rosie O'Donnell. And it's so important that as much as we celebrate the current wave of queer content creators and all the queer stuff we're getting now, which we're getting a lot, and that's amazing. But those people really were brave and bold, and Bros would not exist without the decades of work and the bold choices that artists like Harvey and Amanda and many others made. And I wanted to take a moment in Bros to make sure we were being inclusive of them as well. I think there's a real generation gap in the gay community, in the LGBTQ community. You know, I'm very lucky for all the challenges that I had. I'm in an interesting position where I'm perched between two generations who had very different experiences in terms of the world that they walked into when they were coming of age as a gay person, and how welcoming it was for LGBTQ people, both in the entertainment industry and the world at large. You know, because the generation right above mine really had to, you know, deal with the trauma of those peak years of the AIDS epidemic. And before that, a world where, you know, outside of maybe the West Village and LA and San Francisco was not very welcoming, you know. And then you have the generation 10 years ish younger than mine and younger than that, who, I'm not saying there aren't challenges. Of course there are. And especially for trans people and gender fluid people, they're facing a whole new slew of challenges. But generally speaking, the LGBTQ folks who are 10 years younger than me walked into again, generally speaking, a more welcoming, inclusive world, and definitely an entertainment industry that sort of felt this cultural mandate to be more inclusive, even when maybe they were scared or, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting place to be. And I wanted to make sure that Bros give opportunities to everyone, both the, you know, the younger actors and the actors who really paved the way for us.
Yeah. Harvey Fierstein's book, if anyone hasn't read it, it's so good. And
it's so good.
Yeah. It talks about his career. And I always remember growing up, just when he would pop up in something, even before I knew that I was gay as a young child, like seeing him in Mrs. Doubtfire, Independence Day, when he would show up in these big blockbusters, like, oh, I like that character. I'm interested in that. What that person's doing.
Totally. When Harvey shows up in Bros, I've been to 1 million advanced screenings that we've had. Every time the audience bursts into applause, whether it's an audience with more straight people or more LGBTQ folks, everyone loves Harvey, you know? And I think part of he's just a very talented, unique person in the culture, beyond just being gay. But I think we feel so much for him, you know, because he was one of the few and came out so early and has been with us for decades, you know, and we forget sometimes, and we can't forget that.
Was there anyone you tried to get for Bros that couldn't do it for scheduling or something like that, for cameos or anything like that?
Oh boy.
I don't want to spoil all the cameos.
I don't want to
really
spoil it. There's a bunch of cameos in the movie. So I think there were probably some people that we reached out to who couldn't do it, but also it's kind of, I don't want to spoil it, but it's shocking who does show up.
Yeah.
So I was very, very grateful. It's amazing when it happens in the movie. The audience, again, like, applauds.
It's so good.
You know?
It's so good. I know I'm a huge Mariah Carey fan. I'm a lamb. Yeah. And I know you are too. I asked Luke too, his favorite Mariah song. He didn't know a Mariah song, and it was tough, Billy. It was tough.
Luke McFarlane, but I'm sure he knew a lot of Garth Brooks songs and country songs.
We talked about Shania Twain and Garth, but
yes, he can talk about Shania. Yeah.
But there's a Mariah song in the movie, and I know you're close with her. And I always ask all my guests, but I wanted to do it sort of now instead of at the tail end of the interview, because I know you are friends with her. And I wonder, what's your favorite Mariah Carey song?
Oh boy. I truly do love, there's a remix of Heartbreaker, a very specific, obscure remix that only diehard Mariah fans, aka lambs, but if you don't know, that's a diehard Mariah fan, from, I think it was the late 90s or early 2000s when Heartbreaker came out. There's a remix called Heartbreaker / If You Could Ever Be Lonely, where she covers an old song called If You Could Ever Be Lonely and inserts it into Heartbreaker. And Junior Vasquez, who's like a legendary gay DJ from the New York club scene of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. I mean, he's still around, but, you know, those were like the peak years of it. And I remember going to hear him spin and, you know, going to Twilo and all these clubs back in the day. He did the remix, and she went back into the studio to re-record it, which is rare, you know.
And she does that for a lot of her remixes. People might not know.
Yeah.
She records new vocals.
Anytime You Need a Friend, the Honey remix that she just put on the re-release of Butterfly, you know, there are vocals in there that she had to go back in the studio to record. It was not part of the original recording session. I love that remix. And, you know, I'm a sucker for a great power ballad. You know, I love the ballads. And with Mariah, I really love some of the ballads that maybe weren't singles or weren't as
Huge.
ubiquitous. Like there's a song called All I Ever Wanted. Whenever You Call, which was on Butterfly, I believe.
And number ones
on her Christmas album, Miss You Most at Christmas Time, is this,
which you did a cover of that was so stunning. It was on one of the late shows. I loved that because that's, to me, that's such an underrated Mariah ballad from the Christmas album.
So good. Yeah. She told me
it's melancholy.
Her mom used to say it was too depressing to put on a Christmas album. I love that song. And yeah, Mariah let me sing it on James Corden for Christmas. It was like we were in the middle of COVID and, you know, I don't know. So I went on and did that. And, but that's a really beautiful song. I mean, there are so many.
Yeah. My favorite ballad of hers is Forever from the Daydream album. I think it's just stunning.
Forever. And whenever that came out when I was a teenager, I think there was a video for Forever, but I think it was a concert video. Like it wasn't like a fully produced video, if I remember correctly. Yeah. But in my head, I planned out a whole like narrative video for Forever. I've actually never told her that because it's like one step too far. It's like embarrassing. I had my first kiss with a girl in junior high school, listening to Mariah's second album. There's a song called And You Don't Remember, which wasn't a single, but is a great song. And I told Mariah that. And of course, she gave me the whole history of that song.
Oh, I love it. I was just going to ask, because you've worked with her a couple of times. You were on her Apple Christmas special, and then she's also done a Billy on the Street thing for the holidays. And so I was just going to ask a favorite memory or something, a story from working with her one of those times or talking to her.
She's so great. And she's so down to earth for all of the Mariah-ness of it and the larger than life quality she brings to things for fun. She's really down to earth and very funny, you know, and very self-aware and makes a lot of jokes. You know, when we were making that Christmas special, which was obviously very much for families and very wholesome, the fun thing I like to do is, you know, I'm like dressed as an elf and it's this whole wholesome family Christmas thing. I would whisper something like edgy in her ear, you know, to make her laugh, or I'd make a joke about a celebrity, which of course, you know, couldn't end up in the special, but I just, you know, she loves all that stuff. She's a person, you know, so that's really fun. I love making Mariah laugh.
I don't think people realize how funny she is and sort of in on the joke she is about the whole diva persona.
100% in on the joke and, you know, leans into it for fun and glamour. And, but she's really great. Like, I can't believe how down to earth she is. It was really fun when we shot Billy on the Street with her. You know, Mariah's lived in Manhattan for 20 years. I think she's lived in like the same penthouse somewhere. I mean, she has other houses, of course, but she's a New Yorker. And I think one of the things that bonds us is that she grew up on Long Island and I grew up in Queens, which if you don't know, those are attached basically. So, you know, we're both native New Yorkers. And when we were shooting Billy on the Street in Chelsea, which is where we shoot a lot of Billy on the Street, she pointed out the little studio apartment she lived in, I think on 19th Street when she was 18 or 19, where she wrote Vision of Love. And I think she just has a crazy work ethic. Mm-hmm. You know, you don't stay Mariah Carey this long at this level and still be this relevant unless you are dedicated to doing that. And, you know, she's a songwriter just as much as she is a singer. But it was very cute because I don't think she walks around Manhattan very much. You know what I mean? She's a little too famous for that. And so, you know, she spends her life probably in an Escalade going from one underground garage to another one. But with Billy on the Street, we're walking around Chelsea and there's a restaurant in Chelsea. There's also, you know, there's one in LA. It's called Italy. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's been around a long time now and it's popular. You know, you can go sit and eat at Italy and there's big glass windows. And we walked by and Mariah Carey, first of all, a packed restaurant. Imagine looking at the window and seeing Mariah Carey in full Mariah glam, like leaning into the window. And she literally said, "Oh, that's Italy." And I just thought like, of course, Mariah, she doesn't walk around. You know what I mean?
She's never been to an Italy.
She's never been to an Italy. And I just thought that was really funny. Yeah.
I love that. Billy on the Street. Was there ever anyone that you weren't able to get. I know you sort of resurrected it this past week with Paul Rudd and Jack Black, and it's been so exciting to see. And obviously you're doing so much, but has there been someone on that list that you haven't been able to get?
Probably a few, yeah. Although we've gotten a lot of people. Meryl Streep, would be number one. We've tried. We got close. And I don't know. There's still time, I guess. But Meryl's always been up there. I also just think like everything else she does, she would be so good at it. And she's a New Yorker. She's like she went to Yale, but she was a Broadway actress. She's a real New Yorker. And I think
I miss it, Billy.
Really fun. Was that?
I miss it. It was so nice to see it, Billy on the Street. It was so nice to see it back this past week.
Thank you. Yeah, I was touched by when we put out that Paul Rudd video. We didn't do a press release or anything. We just put it out, and people really were excited about it. I was very touched by that. I mean, I only get bros because of Billy on the Street. I'm very grateful for it. It requires so much of my everything, my energy, my physically, vocally, mentally, and I've done it for a really long time, on and off, since I was 25 years old, and I'm now 44. So that's a really long time to do that particular thing.
Yeah. And I could only imagine the amount of energy. I get tired after my podcast because I feel like it's an hour of high energy and like being alert.
You have to be so on, right?
And I can't.
Billy on the Street's not one of those things you can just phone in one day, like, I'm going to sleepwalk through it today. Well, I can't do that, so it takes a lot out of me, but I obviously, it still makes me laugh when it's good, it's good.
Well, and I was just going to ask you, because I often think my favorite thing you ever did was the Thanksgiving Day Parade, where you had a Rooney Mara float with Katie Couric. Cause I love the Thanksgiving Day Parade. And I always say to my friend, Katie Couric said, there was a line, she said, like, God bless the United States and God bless the United States of Tara. And it always I think of that line and it's so funny.
Then we should be friends. I mean, because you're a real fan if you know that one. And it's also my favorite. And it's not like a typical Billy on the Street because it's like a comedy sketch basically, but we literally recreated the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which I always loved as a kid. But instead of balloons of cartoon characters and Snoopy, we have like a huge balloon of Rooney Mara and a huge balloon of Mila Kunis and a whole float dedicated to Mark Ruffalo and all these actors I'm obsessed with. And Katie Couric did it, and she co-hosts it with me, and she gives like the perfect dry delivery as if she was doing the real parade. And we just had a blast. If you haven't seen it, you have to go watch it. Even if you don't like me, you will like this segment. Go look it up on YouTube.
And it's a different temper than the rest of the show too, because you're both delivering exactly like those Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, which that's my like dream goal, is to be able to host the Thanksgiving Day Parade one day, because it's so absurd. I love it. But even more so than like a traditional episode of Billy on the Street, my sort of fantasy is that you'll resurrect that for a Thanksgiving and like just do versions of that once a year.
So expensive. I can imagine. I think I almost bankrupted True TV, the network we were on. They were very nice for letting me get away with all of this.
I want to. Okay, wait. Let me look at my notes. Oh, Difficult People. I love Difficult People too. As a pop culture junkie, I mean, do you have any favorite memories from that? And I wish that we could have gotten at least 10 more seasons of that show.
Me too. I just did Julie's podcast yesterday, so check that out if you like Difficult People. Her podcast, Double Threat. I love Julie. I love that show. She's a genius. Again, it was one of those things where people were like, at the time, everyone's like, "Well, it's not for everyone," and I'm like, "Well, what's for everyone?" Right. I don't know. It's comedy. Adam Sandler's not for everyone, but you never hear anyone say that he's niche. That. And I like Adam Sandler. I'm just using him as one example. If straight guys gravitate towards something, then it's not niche, even though it's divisive. Right. But if you're a gay person or a woman and you do something that not everyone loves, then you're niche and you're divisive, or you're not for everyone. And we got kind of labeled with a lot of that stuff. And it's interesting because now I'm seeing a bunch of shows pop up which have a Difficult People like tone to them and have managed to stay on longer and have had more people embrace them. And I think sometimes you just need people to get used to something. You know, we were very matter of fact on that show about queer stuff, and Julie was the center of the show, but you know, not necessarily playing the most like likable, like America's sweetheart version of what a woman's supposed to be on a sitcom, you know. And I love that show so much. I do hope we get to do a reunion movie or something. People come up to me all the time.
It lives on. I see clips of it on Twitter all the time. Like there's always stuff popping in and up. And
I think we were one of the first original shows Hulu did. Yeah. It was us and the Mindy Project, but Mindy they took from Fox, so that was already established. And I don't know what they were looking for, but you know.
It'll live on.
I think they jumped the gun on canceling that one.
Yeah. Before I do my last little game with you, I do just also have to say that there's a speech which people will see when they see the movie, but there's a speech on the beach that I just hope people pay extra attention to. It was so beautiful. And it's a speech your character gives in the movie. And I don't want to spoil it. I just want people to really make sure they take it in because I just thought it was great. And I guess maybe a question there is like, did you have to fight to keep that all in? Because it's sort of a long, I don't know if you would consider it like a monologue, but it was beautiful.
You know, that scene is unique for a major studio comedy, you know? And I worried for a long time, actually, that someone would tell us to cut it down. And the first test screening we had in front of an audience where all the execs from Universal, including like the head of all Universal, they come and they're there to see the audience reaction and give you notes. And I literally was having a panic attack, you know, waiting to see what the notes could be. And again, I don't want to ruin it. I want people to discover that in the movie. But I was so worried they were going to ask me to cut it or basically cut it way down. And in the lobby after, all the execs, including Donna Langley, who runs the studio, who's a true badass. Like, I really love her. She's been so supportive. And she looked at me and she said, wow, that moment on the beach, she said, it's really powerful. And I got chills. I was so relieved. And she's a straight woman, you know, she's not a gay man, but she got it, you know, and I think it's important that the movie had a moment like that to speak to what got us here and not only my personal story, but I think the story of a lot of LGBTQ folks up until this moment when the world has become a bit more welcoming. But we needed to acknowledge the history of it as well. You can't just ignore that. So
it was so beautiful. That moment was just, I mean, it really resonated with me. And I had to thank you for it because I thought it was so special. Okay. Last little game I want to play. Renée Zellweger. I won't spoil anything, but we love Renée Zellweger here on the show. And I have a list of her movies and I just want to run through some of these roles and just get your opinion on these movies, these roles. That's all.
Okay.
So Cold Mountain. Do you remember her accent in Cold Mountain?
Can I be completely honest? Don't think I ever saw it.
Oh my God, Billy, you have to go see it just for the accent work.
Other than the clips, and I remember she won the Oscar, but I have to acknowledge I never saw Cold Mountain. And if that gets me canceled, then so be it. I've already been canceled 3 times this year.
Well, I was thinking like this whole press tour. I talked to this about with Luke a little bit because it does sort of feel like a clusterfuck of like, you're all trying to do this great thing, but then also you're trying to be as inclusive and say the right thing. And it must just be kind of exhausting a little bit.
You know,
and even I know you and Joel have worked together, Joel Kim Booster, who did Fire Island. And I sort of felt like that was taken out of context a lot. And I know you had to like explain it. I was like, oh, everything's exhausting.
I honestly, a lot of that stuff happens like only on gay Twitter.
I know. Yeah.
It's such a weird thing. I don't know. Gay men on Twitter get a therapist challenge is what I say. That's the next Twitter challenge. Joel and I are friends. Joel worked on Billy on the Street. Bowen is in Bros. The whole thing was silly. But you know, gay people, it's a tough community, you know?
Well, they're going to be pissed now that you haven't seen Cold Mountain.
I'm sorry. I apologize to the entire Cold Mountain fandom.
Yeah, it's just me. It's just me. Okay, Judy. You've seen Judy, right?
Yes, loved.
So
Absolutely loved it.
So good. Jerry Maguire, her sort of first big breakout role.
I love that movie. Yeah. I haven't seen it in a long time. I really love the song Secret Garden that they used by Bruce Springsteen in that movie. Talk about a great song in a rom-com. How did that get nominated for best song? I don't remember. I
think it did. And also, do you remember on the radio would play the Jerry Maguire mix where you'd hear just like Bonnie Hunt in between?
With the dialogue, no, it's the best.
Good. It's the best. Good. Yeah. And also I remember like falling asleep in college drunk, and I put on Jerry Maguire, and I like woke up the next day and the DVD menu is just playing the instrumental of that song over and over still shots of Jonathan Lipnicki.
What a dream.
Did you ever see One True Thing?
Yep. Saw it in the movie theater.
Her and Meryl.
I saw that. I didn't see Cold Mountain. I saw, because it's Meryl and William Hurt. It's all my favorite people. I remember. I mean, it's so sad. And also there's a beautiful Bette Midler song in that movie, which is kind of under the radar. But I remember liking it. It's very sad. Of course, Meryl's amazing. I remember William Hurt being really good too. I think he's in that movie.
Yeah, and Tom Skerritt, I think, is the brother or the son or something, right?
Well, naturally. Yeah. I mean, there will be no Tom Skerritt erasure on this episode.
How dare you? Wait, okay, so do you have a favorite rom-com? I'm just sort of skipping around here. Do you have an all-time favorite? You mentioned Nora and Nancy.
I really love. It's not like a typical rom-com, but I love this movie, Broadcast News, with Holly Hunter and William Hurt, from the 80s, which I grew up watching a million times, but I watched it like twice over lockdown again. I just love that movie so much. It's a James L. Brooks movie. It's a follow-up to Terms of Endearment. And Holly Hunter, they're all pitch perfect. Joan Cusack is in it. It's pitch perfect. Holly Hunter is beyond good. The screenplay is so good. It was a bit of an inspiration for my character in Bros too. I mean, it's not exactly the same, but I loved how capable and smart and quick she was, and no one's better at her job, and she knows it. She knows she's the smartest person in the room, and she has seemingly all this confidence, and she's very self-reliant and self-possessed, but then she ends up falling like head over heels, like hopelessly in love with this handsome idiot played by William Hurt. And Luke's character in Bros is not an idiot, but I liked the idea that someone who was so self-possessed could just be completely undone by falling for another person. And what happens when that happens? And that's sort of what we started with when we were writing Bros.
You and Luke had chemistry. Not a lot of people have chemistry anymore. I was telling him, like, I feel like no one does chemistry testing anymore. And so it was nice to see the two of you have chemistry. It's important. I mean,
rom-coms, no matter how good the script might be, they live and die based on the chemistry,
I know I have to let you go, Billy, but you mentioned Terms of Endearment, and we talked a little bit about One True Thing, and I missed that sort of mom drama, death kind of 80s, 90s movie, stepmom kind of thing that they used to do. But what do you want to do next? Like, I hope Bros is the most successful movie of the year. Like, it deserves to be, first of all. Everyone out there listening to Everything Iconic, men, women, gay, straight, everyone will love this movie. Go get tickets with your friends. I think it's like the perfect night out to just go have like a fun theater going experience and laugh with people, because we've been so fucking starved for that. Yeah. So go grab some girlfriends, have a bottle of wine, and see this movie, because I think you will have the best time with your friends. Bring your gays, your straights, whoever.
Bring them on. Yeah.
What do you want to do next after this? Like, I think I saw that you were writing something else. Like, what kind of movie would we get next?
I'm at the big early stages of writing a movie that we sold to Amazon. Me and Paul Rudnick, who was an iconic gay screenwriter who wrote Sister Act and wrote Addams Family Values and In and Out. So he's been at this a very long time. So we're collaborating on a movie called Ex-Husbands about a big gay divorce. It's like the gay war of the roses, basically. It's almost like the opposite side of Bros. Bros is about watching two guys fall in love, and this is about watching a couple fall apart, but in a big, funny way. I mean, we're going to keep it real, but it's not a marriage story. It's not like devastatingly sad. Although I like that movie.
I'd watch that too.
So absolutely. But we're in the early stages of that, and some other things I'm working on. But I've really dedicated myself to every moment of those bros adventure. So I'm probably going to need a minute just to relax my brain. I love to work, and I'm really grateful. It's amazing, truly amazing, considering how things were when I started out for gay folks in Hollywood, that I'm getting to do all this stuff. It's not lost on me, and I'm really grateful.
Well, I hope people go see this movie. And I also hope people know you've given so many opportunities too with Billy on the Street to LGBTQ voices that maybe weren't getting staffed, especially at the time, in different shows. And now with this movie giving so many opportunities to LGBTQ people. So just as someone who's trying to make their own stuff, I just want to say thank you. I fucking love this movie so much. And I will make everyone go see it if I can, because it's truly great. So Billy, thank you so much for Bros. September 30th, go see it. Billy, thank you so much.
Thanks, Danny. Thanks for having me.